Mario Kart World is a massive fumble. I know a lot of people have made negative videos on this game, and this will be no exception. At its core, there is a fun game here. Mario Kart World is full of the cartoony, wacky racing that people have come to expect from the series, and the driving mechanics make some meaningful changes from its predecessor. Mario Kart 8 had driving underwater. Mario Kart World has racing on water. Driving atop the waves invokes a different feeling than when driving along a track, since it is possible to trick with the water's motions. Mario Kart 8 had anti-gravity racing. Mario Kart World revamped the trick system to allow for riding on walls and tricking in midair, which offers a similar flavor to anti-gravity, while also providing creative approaches to the courses. Nothing in terms of the core gameplay feels out of place. However, the problem with Mario Kart World is its defining characteristic. This is the first open world Mario Kart game, and the more I play, the more I find the open world is the worst part of the game. Conceptually, the idea of racing on an interconnected world is intriguing, but the execution is a half-baked, half-hearted game that does not live up to its own potential. Mario Kart World is filled with so many weird decisions that for every one thing I can compliment, there are 2 or 3 things I could criticize. The developers wanted the focus to be on intercontinental races, but the tracks are too far apart, resulting in most races comprising of boring straightaways that don't get interesting until reaching the destination. The battle mode is a clear regression from 8 Deluxe, with missing game modes and no dedicated battle courses. The reward system is centered around seemingly random chance, so nothing feels particularly rewarding. I wanted to be Pauline, the most urbanist Nintendo character, but the game only gave her 2 outfits, none of which are Mayor Pauline. The only game mode that makes adequate use of the open world is Knockout Tour, but that's it. And yes, free roam is a joke to me. The whole mode feels completely tacked on. That's not even getting into the online, which I won't because I do not have Nintendo Switch Online. It's a lot easier to find things to complain about in World than it was in Double Dash, Wii, or 8. To be fair, I did have some heightened expectations. We waited longer for this game than for any other Mario Kart game. Before Mario Kart World release, Nintendo published a developer interview that confirmed prototyping began in March 2017. At the time, they felt the formula has been perfected, so to shake things up a bit, they decided to focus on gameplay that revolved around an open world. The reason they waited for the Switch 2 is because they needed the extra horsepower to avoid compromising their original vision. Not only were we waiting 8 years for this game, Nintendo decided to charge $80 for it. Normally, I don't talk about game prices in reviews because I don't think it is helpful for the overall discussion. However, $80 does more to influence how critical I am than $70 or $60 did. At first, I was hoping there would be some crazy revelation that justified the price tag. Maybe there's a story mode that reenacts the entirety of Red Dead Redemption 2, but with Mario characters. Maybe there's a secret concert where Pauline performs a sick cover of The Devil Put Dinosaurs Here by Alice in Chains. Maybe there's some secret third thing that's more realistic. I suppose to justify the price tag, the game would have to have an impressive level of polish and features that are rich with thoroughly enjoyable content. The whole game would need to be as surprising as an $80 price tag. One thing that helps make an $80 price tag more palpable is better presentation values, so I'm glad there are now cinematics for unlocking Special Cup and Mirror Mode. It's a lot better than the menu notifications we've had in other Mario Kart games. Now, if you were expecting me to list out more examples of this game justifying an $80 price tag, there's not really anything else worth pointing out. Unfortunately, after playing Mario Kart World on and off for the last few months, and allowing my thoughts to simmer, I can safely say it has neither been worth the wait, nor worth the price. This shouldn't be too surprising because in the month since this game has released, I have yet to hear a single person say this game was worth $80. Going forward, I will be keeping the price complaints to a minimum and focusing on the game itself. Even at $60, this game would still have been disappointing. Throughout this video, I'm going to spend a lot of time focusing on why the open world is boring to drive across while referring back to the developer interview. I do think it provides some insights on where this game went wrong. The biggest point of contention for this new Mario Kart game are the straightaways. The way the new Grand Prix is structured is, instead of the typical 3 laps around each track, there is a new gimmick that involves driving to the next course. So the first course in a cup will be 3 laps. The second through the 4th course will spend 2 segments driving to the course, followed by 1 anticlimactic lap around the track itself. When criticizing the design of this game, I am mainly going to be focused on the new Grand Prix format. While Knockout Tour offers a different flavor of gameplay since it focuses on a depleting player count, it doesn't affect my opinion of the races. Racing along these connecting routes is boring regardless of whether it is a Grand Prix or a Knockout Tour. They simply do not make for interesting courses. The most interesting tracks in older Mario Kart games are usually centered around some unique gimmick. Tick-Tock Clock has gears that shift over the course of the race. Grumble Volcano is crumbling, with pieces sinking into the lava and changing the track's layout. Electrodrome, not to be confused with Electrodome, is themed around a discotheque. The tracks were all designed around some visual theme or unique gameplay feature. These track gimmicks allowed for them to be strongly defined and stand out amongst their contemporaries. However, the interconnecting routes are not unique. Too many of them are wide open roadways with other cars as the main obstacle. They lack any defining features. If it's not an asphalt road, it's a dirt road. If it's not cars, it's animals that serve the same purpose as cars. All these interconnecting routes blend together, and the developers were never going to make each connecting route unique. Every course had to be designed with a path allowing racers to drive to the neighboring tracks. The developers said if you were to count each of these routes as a course, there would be over 100 courses. How does someone even create 100 tracks with a distinct setting, unique obstacles, all centered around its own gimmick? I don't think this task would be feasible for anyone. So they took the highway driving from Mario Bros. Circuit to Crown City and copied it across numerous other routes in the game. Consequently, it never felt like there was 100 courses. It felt like there was one course with hundreds of variations. There is an inescapable sameness to each of these connecting routes. They aren't nearly as strongly defined as the courses. It seems as though the game needed a smaller world with shorter transitions between courses. I am a little baffled that they felt they needed to have such lengthy straightaways. The developers sort of explain why the tracks are so far away, saying, "We first placed the existing courses in the world based on the directions of the compass and created a setting for them. For example, the climate gets drier as you go west, so we thought we could place the Shy Guy Bazaar course from previous games with its palace in the area, and perhaps place the Desert Hills course nearby." The word nearby doing a lot of heavy lifting. Going northeast, we thought we could make this region colder with a steep, snowy mountain as a landmark, and have a course where you race at its peak. When designing courses based on climate, we also tried to be creative so that the routes that connect courses are seamless and that the scenery around you changes before you know it. Each individual course has its own distinct characteristics, so connecting them all was pretty tricky. We had to place existing courses in a way that fits the context of the world without losing what makes them special. It sounds as though they were more concerned with naturalistic transitions from one set piece to another than the player experience of driving between courses. This definitely helps explain the length of the transitional roadways. It's not just about driving to the next course. It's also about giving the terrain time to transition from one setting to another. Unfortunately, this meant the courses had to be far apart so they could have their own unique setting, meaning the straightaways that everyone loves to hate are a consequence of this game being open world. It goes to show that sprawl is just as bad for racing games as it is for urbanism. I don't want to disparage on straightaways or the lack of 3-lap races too much because the developers have made this sort of thing work in other Mario Kart games. When you look at a track like Mt Wario, there are a lot of moving parts that make for an exhilarating race. And it's not the typical 3-lap structure. It's a linear downhill jam. It starts with dropping out of a plane onto a mountain. At first, there's winding down the snow caps and hitting a ramp. Then the snow goes away and the course becomes icy. Next is a cave section with a river flowing underneath. And we see that we are now driving along a hydroelectric dam. Players may have to adjust the driving lines to activate the speed boost panels. There's a big jump down into a forested region. Players may have to slow down because of the density of obstacles along the path. The home stretch is down a ski range. There are curves to snake down and get speed boosts. There are mounds to trick off of. Mt Wario feels like it's entering a different setting 5 times across one race. Meanwhile, the interconnecting routes only change setting twice. The first segment of the race will be for the biome you're leaving, and the second segment will be for the biome you're entering. Compare and contrast Mt Wario to the connecting route between Skyview Summit and Sky-High Sundae. It starts with leaving Skyview Summit, and then there's a wide, forgiving turn. These turns feel almost too wide to drift around. Next, there is a cave section with minimal curvature. The slope leads down to the second section of track. The scenery doesn't change nearly as dramatically as it does in Mt Wario. It's just one continuous icy slide. The only time the environment shifts into a new setting is during another wide partition of track that leads into Sky-High Sundae. It also doesn't shake things up by introducing different kinds of obstacles or opportunities to shave time during a race. Mt Wario had tighter curvature, narrower paths, and less forgiving turns. This forces players to stay engaged with the roadway in front of them. There's always something to grab your attention. Of course, Mario Kart World has interesting tracks, such as Sky-High Sundae. Right off the bat, there are 2 branching paths, the gliding path and the rail riding path. You can be snazzy and try flying through the ice cream cone along the path, or you can perform tricks as you go down the rail line. There are rails to recenter your driving line and perform a turn. There are more opportunities to perform tricks and get a little speed boost. On the other side of the track, the course splits. There are a lot of different ways to drive over this section of the track, including a hidden centerpiece that ejects drivers into gliding mode. Then there is one final turnaround before a straightaway with other opportunities for tricking. Not only is there more going on in this track than the straightaways, there are different ways to approach the course along each lap. When you're going to Sky-High Sundae on an interconnecting route, nobody is going to be thinking of the alternative routes because there's really only one path. There are fewer approaches to the connecting routes than there are with the lap-type courses. Part of the reason people complain about the connecting routes is because it feels like there's nothing to do other than go straight and follow roughly the same path as everyone else, with no opportunity to break from the pack, pick an alternative route, or shave time during a race. I think a racing game like Mario Kart works best when it strikes a balance between the player needing to be concerned with the track's layout and with the other players. When the design of a connecting route is a linear path with minimal curvature and minimal obstacles, it is not striking the right balance. The core focus becomes having the right item at the right time. It's the only way of getting ahead since there aren't many opportunities to shave time through a better race. If someone does have a strong combination of items, they will stay ahead until someone else gets a strong combination of items, which makes racing feel more determined by luck than by skill. Luck has always been a factor in Mario Kart games. It's difficult to escape that with the item-based gameplay, but that's why the courses need to be designed in a way that rewards good driving and punishes bad driving, so there can still be a perceived level of skill required to get a good position during a race. In Mario Kart World's connecting routes, bad driving is rewarded with items that can make it easy to get back to the front of the pack, and good driving is not being rewarded in a way that makes it easy to stay ahead. The reason the curvature of a track is so important is because it rewards good drivers who can shave off a few precious seconds, and they allow for easily identifiable shortcuts. When a player gets a turbo mushroom, it is intuitive to use it to skip a turn with otherwise impassable terrain. In the final stretch of Mt Wario, there is this snowbank, which presents an opportunity for someone to use a well-timed turbo mushroom to snag a better position during the race. Due to the size of the curves in Mario Kart World's connecting routes, players will need a triple mushroom, gold mushroom, boo, or a star in order to have a chance at cutting these corners. This forces players to strictly follow the path ahead of them. There are also far fewer obstacles along this path. There's never a section like going through the forest in Mt Wario. Mario Kart World's connecting routes have a serious lack of obstacles that invoke any kind of challenge. When heading up Dry Bones Burnout, there are bomb-on cars, but there is so much space that avoiding them is practically a non-issue. Driving into Crown City, there are so few cars that it is a simple matter of heading in a straight line. Toad's Turnpike in Mario Kart 8 is generally considered the most boring track in the game, but at least that track had a higher density of vehicles than the typical straightaway does in Mario Kart World. It felt like there were obstacles to maneuver around. And it's not just the cars that have this issue. When heading from DK Summit to Starview Peak, there are snowboarding Shy Guys, but just like with the cars, they are too spread out to be a substantial obstacle. This game needed to do a lot more to make the connecting routes interesting, and I think one idea would be to add weather-based hazards that affect driving conditions. A cool detail with this game is when someone uses a lightning bolt, there is a short rainstorm afterwards. This game needed way more weather events like that. Why isn't there a snowstorm on the mountains, or a dust storm that substantially reduces visibility when driving to Shy Guy Bazaar? These low-density obstacles would be scarier if they were paired with low visibility. It would force players to slow down and be more careful along the seemingly open road. Meanwhile, if the track can clearly be seen, then there should be more cars on the road, more snowboarders, more dust devils, or something that would fundamentally change the way the tracks are approached. The interconnecting routes are so safe and straightforward that they circle back to being boring. Apparently, Mario Kart World does have a dynamic weather system. The developers touched on it, saying, even when driving along the same road, the scenery changes depending on the weather and time of day, so it feels like you're heading somewhere new every time. So, no matter how many times you play, it never feels like you've experienced everything the game has to offer. I wholeheartedly disagree. I don't think the weather system is dramatic enough to make a difference. There's a lot of untapped potential for random events along the open road. In fact, the only time I've seen some unusual weather was this item box rainstorm during free roam. It's a start, but it would be nice if there were wacky weather events that occurred during the normal races. To be fair, there is one item that helps add some randomness to the tracks, the Kamek Orb. I have recorded myself playing through every cup in Knockout Tour and Grand Prix on 150cc, and I only have a few clips of this item in action. It is astonishingly rare, but it does help address the lack of obstacles issue. Kamek placed a few Conquistadors on this track. I didn't need to do much to avoid them. They also placed a few Pokies on this other track. I also didn't need to do much to avoid them. They also placed Spike Balls on this track. I was already jumping over it anyway. I will have some harsh words on the way this game approaches unlocking characters, but giving credit where it is due, this is an attempt at addressing how boring the straightaways are. It counts as a dynamic element that players will have to look out for and maneuver around. The issue is, it is too rare to make a substantial difference. Even when Kamek does appear, they drop a handful of enemies and disappear for the rest of the cup. It's really just for a brief couple of seconds that you have to be concerned with the enemies along the path. Meanwhile, the thwomps in Bowser's Castle 64 do a lot more to thwart players than basically any obstacle in Mario Kart World. They try to crush you in this room. They're trying to get ahead of you to cut you off in this room, and they're blocking the opening to the next room. Then they are sliding around in this room. The difference is night and day. The thwomps in Bowser's Castle 64 feel like a genuine threat you have to look out for and prepare to maneuver around. There's also this final jump where players must be careful to avoid the lava spouts. Simply having moments where players have to look ahead and readjust the way they are driving in order to avoid certain obstacles makes a track more engaging. The enemies spawned by Kamek and the enemies that are placed naturally are a mild inconvenience. This makes for some disinteresting track design to say the least. Who is honestly going to crash into these wigglers here? They're not even walking on the driving path. Meanwhile, the wiggler in Maple Treeway is actually positioned in a way that makes it an obstacle. So my next question is, why the forgiving design? Why the wide roadways, wide curvature, and sparse obstacles? Well, it all seems to tie back to the game's decision to increase the player count from 12 to 24. And increasing the player count was to help fill the straightaways with more content to invoke the feeling that it was a proper race. As stated in the developer interview, by creating routes in a vast world, you could end up with players spread out in various places, which could diminish the sense that you're racing against each other. So we figured that by increasing the number of racers, you'd be sure to see some competitive action here and there. This change affected everything, and I would argue it was for the worse. To accommodate more players, the courses needed to be widened to handle this many racers heading through them. Wider tracks means more forgiving design, more space to maneuver around obstacles, wider curvature, and generally less interesting geometry for racing. Wider roads makes it so driving feels slower because there are fewer points of interest that could be used to gauge vehicle speed. Since the obstacles are less of a threat, players have to start engaging with each other more, and this means there are more items being thrown out by everyone. It is a little weird to me that item boxes used to have a delay before respawning, but now they respawn practically instantly, as if to give everyone a chance at pulling an item. This only makes courses feel more hectic, and it seems to be done to compensate for the lack of interesting obstacles along the course. There are more characters throwing items now, leading to more chaos, so perhaps the developers didn't feel the need to make more hectic course designs like we have seen in the past. The forgiving nature of the straightaways also makes mirror mode a little worse. Part of the challenge of mirror mode was relearning all the turns. This is no longer a problem. There is no substantial difference between heading in a nearly straight line or a mirrored version of that nearly straight line. I would even go as far to say accommodating this many players and making the track safer to drive on makes the normal courses less fun as well. Desert Hills feels substantially less hilly, as though the space that would have gone for more hills needed to be dedicated to safer, wider turns. In the final stretch of Toad's Factory, there's a lot more driving space between these tractors. And if you do run into the mud, it doesn't slow you down nearly as much as it did in the Wii game. So the mud is less of a hazard. Boo Cinema has a lot of empty space, and the film strip could have been a lot wackier than a turnaround. I get the impression that if this was a level in Mario Kart 8, it would have been. I took the time to dip my toes back into the older Mario Kart games in preparation for this video, and I find I much preferred the tighter geometry of those tracks. It allowed for more precision when cutting corners and maneuvering around obstacles. It allowed the content of the track to feel more dense and varied, again like we see in Mt Wario. It allowed shells to ricochet in a satisfying or frustrating manner depending on who is getting hit. It's funny how wider roads are problematic in both racing games and in urbanism. Adding more players wasn't the solution to the empty connecting routes the developers were looking for. It goes to show that doubling the total racers doesn't make the game more fun unless it's a double dash mode with 12 vehicles. Part of the reason the connecting routes don't have much curvature is because the developers found it made the tracks more difficult to race through. As stated in the developer interview, when going from point A to point B, we tried placing lots of bends along the way like we always do. But with too many bends, you lose sight of your destination. Then your goal from traveling point A to point B becomes more difficult. That said, driving for ages down a straight road isn't much fun either, you don't say. So we figured what we were lacking was some kind of gameplay mechanic for straight roads. It's such a weird statement to me because they are basically admitting that the core gameplay loop isn't particularly fun, and the open world doesn't mesh well with the way they typically design courses. This is where they got the idea to revamp the trick system. In the developer's own words, with such a vast world, we thought it'd be a shame if you were just driving in a straight line the whole time. Then we found a hint from a book that said, skateboards create infinite possibilities in a city with just a single piece of wood. Tricks can open up a multitude of driving possibilities for just a single wall or dirt track. We thought it would be more fun to be able to drive in completely different ways based on the player's imagination, so we made the gameplay more varied. They're not wrong. Since Mario Kart Wii, performing tricks has been a fun way to spice up the tracks. It's a free, stylish way of getting a mini speed boost after performing a jump. However, this plan backfired, and it wound up benefiting the normal lap-based courses far more than the connecting routes. The problem is, it doesn't feel as though there is much more to do than simply going straight, and being able to spam a trick button does nothing to address this issue. It certainly doesn't help that there aren't nearly as many opportunities for trick-based shortcuts as there are in the normal courses. This game is still missing something. It sounds like the game needed to be less like Desert Bus and more like Tony Hawk's Downhill Jam. This is not a normal Tony Hawk game. It's a racing game with a skateboarding style of a Tony Hawk game. Players must head downhill, but while doing so, they are skating along combo lines. The meter on the right-hand side of the screen is filled up as they land tricks. Once full, they can perform a speed boost. There are also shortcuts to keep an eye out for. Sometimes this will require grinding a specific rail, performing a sticker slap on the sign to quickly turn around, or jumping out of a window, among other things. Despite the linear nature of these levels, there's a lot of space for shortcuts and alternative routes, something Mario Kart World could have used. Perhaps Mario Kart World was missing a mechanic where the tricks fed into some kind of meter that players can fill to charge a turbo boost that can be used at any time. This would encourage them to find ways to perform the snazzy maneuvers while racing on the connecting routes. Maybe they could have also made it so rail riding was accompanied with a balance meter, and if you stay on the rail, you get a speed boost. Either of those options would have been a lot better than making it so riding the rails appears slower than racing on the road. Although, there's still the other side of the issue. There aren't a whole lot of opportunities to perform tricks, especially when compared to the actual courses. The trick system feels so close yet so far from being a viable solution to improving the straightaways. Since the straightaways are so long and boring, it's easy to suggest adding 200cc to make them more exciting. Honestly, I am torn on this solution. Mario Kart on the Wii U added 200cc, an ultra-fast game mode to zoom around the tracks. It was tough to get used to the speed because some tracks weren't particularly well designed for it, but that was part of the challenge. Players had to brake sometimes instead of drift along each turn while holding the A button. Jumps would launch them much higher and further, so it was harder to control the vehicle while in the air. When Mario Kart World was unveiled to have these long straightaways with wide forgiving turns, it seemed like it would be there to accommodate the speed of 200cc. Unfortunately, the game was capped at 150cc instead. I would have liked to see Knockout Tour in 200cc. It is the best new addition to the game because players drop out if they can't keep up in this test of endurance. But so much time is spent on these disinteresting straightaways that it is difficult to play longer sessions of this mode without wanting to switch over to a more traditional 3-lap Grand Prix. However, if driving along these routes was several times faster, the forgiving nature would be more forgivable. At the same time, if 200cc is being added just to get the boring sections of track over with, then it is another band-aid fix to the actual problem, and players who lack the skill needed for this mode will be left out of a proper solution. It does feel like an awful lot of solutions in this game were just band-aid fixes. Doubling the player count to better fill the course and revamping the trick system was the developers' attempt at making the straightaways more engaging, but it didn't work. While I would try 200cc if it was added down the line, I am not convinced it would help. If a track isn't enjoyable at 150cc, simply making it faster would not be much of an improvement. People aren't exaggerating when they say the routes mainly involve going in a straight line. Easily the worst offender is the bridge between Faraway Oasis and Crown City. For a full minute of gameplay, it is a simple matter of holding down the A button to accelerate forward and sometimes changing lanes to hit a boost panel. If the connecting routes are meant to be treated as courses, this is easily the worst course in the series. Going back to Mt Wario for a second, this track is perfectly fine at 150cc. It would be more challenging at a higher speed tier, but I think it is already engaging enough at the typical max speed we see from the series. I can't stress enough that there is no one solution to salvaging the connecting routes. Mario Kart World needed dynamic weather that creates random events along the track. There needed to be hazards that felt hazardous. There needed to be tighter curves that are more open to shortcuts. 200cc feels like it would be another workaround to make the open world more fun. I hate to say it, but this is a game full of workarounds for the open world. When reading the developer interview, it sounds like this is how they came up with the game we see. They wanted to make an open world Mario Kart game, which injected a lot of challenges with the game's design. In order to give the track their own distinct setting, they had to be spread far apart, so the biomes can naturally transition from one set piece to another. The long distances between tracks made it difficult to connect each course in a unique and engaging manner, so they defaulted to boring roadways. Too many turns made getting from point A to point B difficult, so to ensure players knew where they were going, they were forced to keep the transitional sections straight. The straightaways meant players could spread out more, making the course feel empty, so they doubled the player count from 12 to 24. This meant wider, more forgiving courses with less interesting geometry, but at least the connecting routes felt full. Then they revamped the trick system in a fruitless attempt to make getting from one course to another more fun. Every questionable decision in this game is a consequence of it being open world. No matter how I look at it, Mario Kart World represents the worst kind of open world game. When Zelda made the jump to a seamless, expansive Hyrule, the setting allowed for exploration to be at the forefront of the game. Breath of the Wild fixed a problem people had with Skyward Sword. It was too linear and too restrictive. With Mario Kart World, there is no problem that is being solved. Conversely, this decision created problems that the developers could not fix. Outside of Knockout Tour, I struggle to find a single mechanic that is enhanced by the open world setting. Was this really supposed to be a fun, new way to experience Mario Kart? Lengthy connecting routes that mainly involve going straight? I've never felt so disengaged with races in a Mario Kart game. Mario Kart World feels like a failed experiment. Reading the developer interview, it's hard not to feel bad for them. They clearly wanted to make something great, and they didn't want to give up on their vision, but they clearly struggled to make an open-world Mario Kart game. If I were to pinpoint where Mario Kart World went wrong, it was the decision to spread its courses so far apart. As much as I hate the execution, I like the idea of racing on an interconnected map. It adds more connective tissue between courses, which I appreciate. I think the developers would have gotten a lot more mileage out of this game if they focused on cramming as many courses next to each other as possible in order to minimize the amount of time spent transitioning from one course to another. The game world has no business being this big. For a brief moment of positivity, I do like how there was some attempt at grouping courses together. The Banana Cup, for example, seems to be going for a tropical vacation theme. It starts in Peach Beach and then heads over to a beach town, followed by a park where dinosaurs have been brought back to life through advanced cloning techniques. It reminds me of that movie, Billy and the Clonosaurus. The cup concludes with a trip to the Great Question Mark Block ruins. The Banana Cup feels like a proper excursion, from a quaint resort to an ancient temple. However, the idea of having a beach resort be this far away from a resort town is kind of silly to me. The developers said they didn't want to lose what made the tracks special, so they spread them far apart, but I fail to see how a beach resort and a beach town are substantially different from each other. I would even add Koopa Troopa Beach to this discussion, even though it is a part of a different cup. This is just a sandy circle that loops around a rock formation 5 times. These three courses are not different enough to justify spreading them so far apart. I think a sandy beach, a beach resort, and a resort town pair with each other nicely, and they could be stacked right next to each other. If the world was smaller, the transitional sections would go from minutes of driving on straightaways to about 20 seconds before dropping into the next racetrack. Plus, they could have kept distinct settings by placing facades around the world. If they wanted an immediate transition from vaguely Arizona desert to Crown City, they could have had a conjoined section with cliffs on one side and buildings on another, and a tunnel that is designed like a warp pipe. They could have used cartoon logic to fake the transitions, and the idea of a building being painted sky blue to blend in with a canyon would be hilarious. That stuff is comedy gold. The game should be filled with details like that. If the continent was smaller and less emphasis was placed on gradual transitions, we could have had races that spent more time in the actual track. A big issue with Mario Kart World is not only does most of the race take place on boring straightaways, they also have a tendency to steal the spotlight from more interesting tracks. Peach's Castle in the Shell Cup is abysmal. There's a lot of highway driving in the lead up to the course, and then upon arriving, the race is just a U-shaped lap around the base of the castle, and we barely even get to see the castle itself. Meanwhile, the Special Cup has a proper lap that goes around the castle. Why not just add one more lap that does this? Instead, every course aside from the first one in a cup has a lengthy connecting route followed by one anticlimactic lap. Dandelion Depths is another weird example of this. It is the second course in the Leaf Cup, and the cup's opening presentation highlights this underground section. Unfortunately, this part only lasts for around 30 seconds, while several minutes are spent driving to the Dandelion Depths. People don't like commuting in real life, and they certainly don't like it in racing games. As per usual, a lot of time is spent building up to the track by driving on roadways, dodging cars, and snaking up a mountain. It's not unique or memorable because there are plenty of other connecting routes that also involve driving on roadways while dodging cars. By the time the race is finished, it's easy to forget that you drove through a chasm with dandelions. Some tracks handle the transitions a little better though, such as Boo Cinema. It begins with a normal scenic drive, and then it makes a turn to a spooky forest. In the lead up to the theater, there is a rickety dock that is kind of reminiscent of Boo levels from classic Mario Kart games. The main attraction of the course is one lap through a theater, then through the screen, and then wrapping back to the atrium. It feels as though one of the most creative premises is wasted because of this game's insistence on making the interconnecting routes the majority of the race. Honestly, they could have made the 3-lap structure work if the world was smaller. Imagine if this course didn't feel the need to concern itself with a long drive from Dandelion Depths, and it was just an entire cup in a spooky forest. It could have had a classic Boo level on the dock outside the cinema, and then a more complicated level within the theater. Going a step further with this, Crown City could have had a Coconut Mall from Mario Kart Wii and a Super Bell Subway from Mario Kart 8 without them feeling out of place. Have there be a whole city-themed cup so racers never have to go from one biome to another in order to get to the next racetrack. Driving from a city's main boulevard to a mall within the city, or a nearby subway terminal, wouldn't take nearly as long as driving from one completely distinct setting to another distinct setting. The concern of making sure there's enough time for the terrain to transition to the next biome would be eliminated. The spotlight could be left on the course itself, so no more singular laps at the end of the lengthy connecting route. I genuinely believe it was a serious miscalculation to spread the courses so far apart. The lengthy interconnecting routes undermine the quality of this game's courses. It's unfortunate that the best way to enjoy Mario Kart World is to ignore the central gameplay concept and focus on 3-lap races. This game does have some great tracks. Whistle Stop Summit is a fun course that plays into the rail riding nicely. Bowser's Castle is exhilarating. It might be the best iteration of Bowser's Castle in the series. DK Spaceport is a creative reimagining of a classic NES game. It's too bad that the connecting routes have so much baggage that the game would be a lot better without them. There are plenty of people who would prefer this game if it was a traditional Mario Kart without the open world. When people don't want to engage with the defining feature for this game, it's easy to say the developers failed to shake up the Mario Kart formula. Sure, they could always add in a classic Grand Prix mode and an online lobby that removes the interconnecting routes. But that would also be an admission that this game failed to create a captivating world to race across. I know that sounds harsh, but the defining characteristic is the open world, and it's also the worst part of the game. Mario Kart World isn't just about the races though. There's also a battle mode, which consists of mini-games that provide a different flavor of gameplay than the typical races. Personally, battle mode has never been the focus of what I like to play in a Mario Kart game. I much prefer the normal races, but this game won't change anyone's mind on the feature because it was completely neglected. Mario Kart 8 on the Wii U had the worst battle mode in the series. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe on the Switch fixed that by delivering a proper battle mode. One thing it did right was having 5 game modes: Balloon Battle, Shine Thief, Bomb on Blast, Coin Runners, and Renegade Roundup. Only 2 of these modes return in Mario Kart World: Balloon Battle and Coin Runners. Balloon Battle is a lot of fun. The balloons are basically your health bar. When you get hit, you lose a balloon, and you can steal a balloon by running into another racer with a turbo mushroom. This game mode is a series staple. Balloon Battle has been in every Mario Kart game. There's just one glaring flaw though: the 3-minute timer. Nintendo, in all their brilliance, does not allow players to adjust this timer at all. It's locked to 3 minutes with no way of being extended, reduced, or removed. Balloon battles are the most fun when they are elimination based, meaning the last racer with a surviving balloon wins. The timer undermines this, and the lack of customization prevents players from being able to play the way they may prefer. To be fair, the timer does make sense for online battles with random players. There is an obvious solution to this though: add a shot clock. Make it so after 3 minutes, players have 30 seconds to pop someone's balloon, otherwise the game ends. This would keep the spirit of an elimination-based game mode while ensuring the timer still does its job of ending the game after too much time has passed. As for Coin Runners, it involves driving around to pick up coins. When players are hit, they will drop their coins, like in the base game. It's fine, but I don't find it to be particularly fun. So that's Mario Kart World's battle mode. It kind of bothers me that this game is missing courses that are tailored for battle mode. Instead of having original battle arenas, it's more like how the Wii U version of Mario Kart 8 had battle mode take place on the tracks. It is admittedly better in World though, because at least these are locations that feel like an arena, but I can't help but miss maps from Double Dash and Mario Kart Wii. There's plenty of dead space in Mario Kart World's world that could have at least gone towards recreations of older battle courses. People who only play Mario Kart World don't know what they are missing. What happened to Shine Thief? The goal of this mode was to keep a Shine sprite in possession until the time runs out. Balloon Battle was focused on combat. Coin Runners is geared towards collecting, and Shine Thief is focused on defending a Shine sprite by maneuvering around players or using items. It invokes a different playstyle from the others. The playstyle you're seeing is using one controller to pretend you're 2 separate players. This mode is only featured in Double Dash and in 8 Deluxe. This game already has Bomb-Ombs. How hard could it be to add Bomb on Blast? It was just Balloon Battle, but the only item was Bomb-Ombs. And before you ask, no, you can't customize the item rule set in Balloon Battle to be bombs only. Custom rule sets would make too much sense. It's honestly bizarre how inflexible this game is. There's no way to create a custom knockout tour. You're stuck with the pre-made routes when playing this mode. There's no way to play a classic Grand Prix that focuses on 3-lap races. There's no online lobbies for people who prefer lap-type races. There's no granular rule sets for versus mode and classic mode. There's no way to turn off specific items. There's not even volume sliders. If you want to listen to the game's soundtrack, While in free roam, you are forced to listen to all the other ambient noises and engine sounds, which interferes with simply being able to soak in the soundtrack. Nintendo cultivated a rigid way to play and expects one size to fit all. Where is Renegade Roundup? This was a cool game mode where one team had piranha plants that would gobble players from the other team. It was an in-between of Balloon Battle's combat focus and Shine Thief's defense focus. It was a fun new battle mode that was only featured in 8 Deluxe, and since I have no desire to buy 8 Deluxe, I am never going to experience it. This is honestly a big part of why Mario Kart World is so disappointing. I had Mario Kart 8 on the Wii U. The battle mode in that game was kind of lousy. They finally revamped it in 8 Deluxe, which was nice, but it wasn't enough for me to spend $60 on a game I already had. Now, there is a new Mario Kart game on the Switch 2 that I am willing to buy, but I still don't get to play a decent battle mode. We waited longer for this game than for any of the others, and Nintendo charged $80 for it, just for it to be missing game modes that were in its immediate predecessor. With all this complaining, would you believe me if I said they found a way to make time trial worse? Because they did. In older Mario Kart games, the time trial would show lap splits, so you can tell at a glance which lap had your best performance. For some baffling reason, Mario Kart World doesn't expose this information. It is tracked internally, otherwise it wouldn't be able to say if you are performing better than a ghost during a race. But the game does not show this information to the player. Lap splits is such a weird omission because it was a useful feature and it wouldn't take long to add this into the game. The next major feature for Mario Kart World is free roam. I am glad I waited to make this review because on September 23rd, Nintendo released an update that made completing this mode more enjoyable, but more on that later. Upon booting up the game, the last selected character can be seen racing around the Mario Kart world. It is so annoying that this continent doesn't have a proper name. What is this, Fire Emblem Fates? Tucked away at the bottom right corner is the option to enter free roam. This mode allows players to explore the map at their leisure. Scattered around the map are question mark panels, which encourage players to check every corner of the tracks. There are also peach coins hidden in a similar fashion, but they are more spread out. They can be found along places that aren't visited during the typical races. The challenge lies in figuring out how to get both of these collectibles, which is not always obvious. The main draw of free roam are P-switch missions. Across the world are different P-switches that, when hit, will activate a mission. The way I see it, P-switch missions, question mark panels, and peach coins are basically this game's Korok seeds. In Breath of the Wild, Korok puzzles was an easy activity whose complexity ranged from picking up a rock to shooting some targets. They were simple, bite-sized minigames that helped give the player more ways they could engage with the world around them. A P-switch mission operates in the same fashion. It is going to be a short mission that typically lasts 20 to 30 seconds. These activities are a helpful way to warm up and practice various techniques. Some of them can be surprisingly challenging. There are a grand total of 394 missions, but only 2 mission types: collecting 8 blue coins and racing through rings. Free roam can get a bit repetitive due to the lack of variety in its activities. What's weird is the game almost shakes up the activities in free roam. There are a few random challenges, such as chasing Nabbit, that can be found around the game world. Since these aren't associated with a specific P-switch mission, they can be a surprising encounter. It does make me wonder why the game doesn't have more random events when roaming around. Mario Kart World also needed some other kind of minigame. I have heard people suggest they could have added a door-dashing minigame where you race around to deliver food items to various characters. I like this idea because it would have provided more purpose to the food vendors around the world, and it would be a unique game mode for Mario Kart. They could also have added a crazy taxi-style minigame where you race characters to their destinations, while Pauline performs a sick cover of various songs by Bad Religion and The Offspring. I don't mind not having a dedicated story mode or adventure mode, but it would have been nice It is a little peculiar that Mario Tennis Aces, the upcoming Mario Tennis Fever, and Mario Golf Super Rush had a story mode, but Mario Kart, the most popular Mario spin-off and one of the best-selling Nintendo franchises, doesn't. In the end credits, there is a newspaper flyover saying Rainbow Road has returned, so it would be nice if this was tied to some greater story. As I said earlier, an open world setting could fundamentally change the way a Mario Kart game is designed. But outside of Knockout Tour, there aren't any new game modes that fully take advantage of the world. This is why I feel the game doesn't lean into the open world setting. It's as though the developers were content with just driving 2 courses and didn't consider other activities that could only work in an open world Mario Kart game. The open world does not complement or enhance the gameplay at all. Free roam would also have benefited if it didn't feel so segmented from the rest of the game modes. I do like the P-switch missions, and it can be fun to collect peach coins or activate question mark panels. It's not the core of the game in the same way Grand Prix or Knockout Tour is. It's a simple side activity that gives players a different way to approach the maps. It allows players to enjoy the game in smaller chunks without committing to a full race. I do like the premise here, and I think there are plenty of positives. The way I see it, free roam works best as an intermission when not playing the core game modes. But that does make me wonder, why can't I start the core game modes through free roam directly? If I want to start a time trial, why can't I just select a course on the map while in free roam? It's nice being able to practice shortcuts through free roam, but why do I have to back out to the main menu and head to the time trial submenu if I want to practice with a timer? Why are some P-switch missions designated to be a race, but I can't start Grand Prix, Knockout Tour, or Versus from here? I think most criticisms towards the lack of content when playing free roam would be resolved if it wasn't trying to be a completely separate mode. Currently, it lacks cohesion with the rest of the game. The developers needed to do more to blur the lines between free roam and the core gameplay. I genuinely wish free roam was a hub to access the other game modes, instead of something that is awkwardly placed to the side, like the button to access free roam. This would be too big of an undertaking to fix now that the game has already been released, but there are some smaller improvements that would be more feasible to implement down the line, and Nintendo has already started fixing parts of this game mode. The reason the September 23rd update was a big deal is because the game originally did not track completed P-switch missions or collected peach coins. If you think that is stupid, you are correct. It was dumb. It was dumb that the only way to know if a mission was completed was to remember where it was and check if the P-switch was gray or blue, while having no way to verify their location or remember which ones you started but didn't finish. Even though this has been fixed, I just can't get over the fact that Nintendo charged $80 for a game that was missing a feature as basic as tracking stuff on a map. However, giving credit where it is due, this update did make free roam a bit more enjoyable. There are just a few other features I would hope they could add in the future. The first one is a custom restart. There are plenty of times where I want to respawn in a specific location. It may be near a point of interest, like a UFO or a peach coin, and there are times when respawning near a P-switch doesn't suffice. I would also like a way to pin points of interest on a map. Sometimes I don't feel the need to go after a peach coin, or I am having trouble getting it. It would be nice to leave a reminder that there is something in that location. They should also tighten up how long it takes to retry a mission. Spending a few seconds rewatching the opening cinematic may not sound like a big deal, but when players may be restarting every 10 or so seconds, rewatching the start of a P-switch mission does get a tad annoying. Since some P-switches are more challenging than others, it would also be nice if they did something to indicate the intended skill level. Changing the color from blue to red, for example, would be enough for players to know that they have encountered an easy mission or a hard mission. The game could also use more challenging P-switch missions in general. It feels like an awful lot of these missions never advance beyond a tutorial level of difficulty. Without iterating on the complexity of the challenges, it's just another way free roam is not living up to its own potential. Even as a tutorial, the game rarely teaches any worthwhile strategies beyond simply pressing the button or doing a trick sometimes. Flying through rings and collecting blue coins would be more interesting if it was the game's way of helping players learn the courses by showing them shortcuts and introducing other ways they could be approached. I am sure if I spend enough time thinking about this, I could come up with other incremental fixes that would make free roam a more pleasant experience. However, there is still a more complicated issue here. Beyond the intrinsic value of playing missions and finding peach coins or question mark panels, there is no reason to participate in this game mode. I'll admit that is a little hyperbolic. Technically, playing free roam is required to unlock mirror mode. The prerequisites are trophies in 150cc Knockout Tour and in Grand Prix, activate 10 question mark panels, collect 10 peach coins, and complete 10 P-Switch missions. This is the only time a complex series of actions builds to a substantial reward. Outside of unlocking mirror mode, the game does next to nothing to incentivize playing free roam. Mario Kart's reward and progression structure is garbage. There is no other way to put it. It is too reliant on seemingly random chance to passively get rewards, so no individual reward feels particularly meaningful. One of my favorite additions to this game are the costumes. Generally, the outfit selection is good. Aurora Rosalina was a great one in Mario Kart Tour, so I'm glad to see it in a Mario Kart game I actually feel like playing. It's cool that Yoshi colors also come in different outfits, but it is a tad strange that Shy Guy wasn't given the same kind of treatment. I like Conductor Toadette. Peach's vacation outfit is one of my favorites. I am a little disappointed that there is no Dry Bowser, but his other alts are fine. The costume selection is mostly good, but they could have done a lot more to make getting a costume feel rewarding. Mario Kart Wii probably has the best reward system, since players had to engage with a variety of content that had varying levels of difficulty to unlock all the characters and the karts. There were hard challenges, such as unlocking Rosalina by completing all Grand Prix Cups on Mirror Mode with 1-star rank or higher. There were also easy challenges, such as unlocking Rosalina by having a save file of Super Mario Galaxy. It's too bad something like this wasn't replicated here. The mechanic to unlock the costumes in World is lame. As I mentioned earlier, there are food vendors scattered across the world, and they serve a different type of food depending on their location. This food may transform the selected character into one of their costumes. At first, it seems completely random, but they are consistently transformed based on the type of food. So, if someone wants to get all the costumes so they can fill the roster, what does that look like? Well, at first, they are going to mindlessly drive around a spot with a dense series of food items, such as Whistle Stop Summit or the bottom of Peach's castle. If they are still missing outfits, they will start driving around aimlessly until they find a vendor with a specific food item. They will then repeat this action for all 24 characters with unique outfits. This is the optimal strategy of getting all the costumes. This whole process takes about an hour or two, assuming the character has been unlocked from Grand Prix first. Is this method for unlocking costumes fun, or is it so trivially easy that they might as well have been unlocked by default? Because my answer is the latter of those two. The developers do have an explanation for this weird system. We discussed the idea of using coins to buy clothes from clothing stores. Really wish they went with that. But that would have meant stopping at stores to shop, which would have disrupted the flow, given that this is a world where you can keep driving. That's when the idea of food came up. We thought, why don't we have a drive-through system where characters eat while driving, and that makes them change outfits or transform into a different character. Though it's utterly ridiculous, and they went with it anyway. So, let me get this straight. The whole point of the food vendors littered across the world was so you can unlock costumes without interrupting the flow of racing. Never mind the fact that free roam was already a relaxed game mode where players could shop at clothes stores without interrupting the gameplay flow, since you're not doing any racing during that mode. Not to sound like a broken record here, but this is why free roam feels completely tacked on. The vendor system makes a lot more sense in a world without this feature. They easily could have made peach coins more valuable if they were collected and exchanged for costumes for the other characters. It doesn't seem like it would be too difficult to create a gameplay loop that did more to incentivize free roam. In addition to refining the gameplay loop, Mario Kart World also needed to do something to diversify the way different character outfits are rewarded. There's an alt for Aviator Peach and Aviator Mario. Why not tie that into completing some flying-based challenge? There's Pirate Wario. What if that required beating a time trial on Wario's shipyard? There's a bunch of pro racer alts that all seem to require eating cake at Peach's castle. What if they were all unlocked by completing a special challenge to prove that you are, in fact, a pro racer? Making it so the player can unlock different cosmetics is a great way of making a game more engaging and increasing the replayability. But since it is a simple matter of eating food at various vendors, it's difficult to feel satisfied with getting a new outfit. I get the impression Nintendo severely underestimated the value being able to redeem collectibles for a new costume has over being transformed and given a new outfit. I am also not a fan of how the costumes were distributed among the entire cast. Mario gets a whopping 10 costumes. Luigi, Peach, and Yoshi get 9. Luigi was right there. Luigi could easily have as many costumes as Mario. Plus, there isn't a black Yoshi in this game. If they added it, that's 10 for Yoshi. And Peach obviously deserves the fan favorite from Mario Kart 8, Pink Gold Peach. Typically, characters will have at least 5 alternative outfits, although there are some exceptions to this. Birdo, Shy Guy, and Lakitu will only have 3. Donkey Kong only has 2, his base form and a special costume. Finally, there's Pauline, who technically didn't receive any new outfits. In previous Mario Kart games, some characters would swap to a biker outfit when riding a bike, and they had a default outfit for the kart. I am glad Mario Kart World got rid of that arbitrary restriction, but if they retained it, Pauline would still have the same number of outfits. Since the game has released, people have wondered if this game would get any kind of DLC, preferably as free expansions because $80 game. And I am starting to doubt Nintendo has any plans for post-release expansions. The main source of speculation comes from the fact that Pauline and Donkey Kong don't have nearly as many outfits as the rest of the cast, and there was also an upcoming Donkey Kong game. People believe that perhaps some outfits would be added as some collaborative DLC to help market Donkey Kong Bonanza. It is October, and Nintendo still hasn't confirmed if they have any such plans. They also haven't confirmed if they have plans for any kind of post-release expansion. The only thing Bonanza's release proved is voice actors from the game did work in Mario Kart World. I don't want to say who they played because it's a pretty massive spoiler, but I do feel the need to dispel a rumor. So the rumor is Yu Hayashi and Suguo Mogami are credited in Donkey Kong Bonanza and in Mario Kart World, but the credits don't list who they voiced in World. This has led people to speculate that the characters they played are going to be added to the game as playable racers. There's just one tiny little flaw with this theory. They were also credited in Princess Peach Showtime under the same circumstances as they were credited in World. And yes, I do feel like Detective Peach for pointing that out. Voice actors tend to have multiple roles, not always crediting a specific character, so matching credits in the hopes of it confirming or alluding to DLC is just grasping at straws. Some people may also use the Booster Course DLC as proof that we may just be waiting a few years before we get new tracks. If the Booster Course tracks were made exclusively for the Switch, then I would agree with that sentiment. But the thing is, these tracks were largely comprised of assets ripped from Mario Kart Tour and repackaged into 8 Deluxe. This is why there is a massive visual discrepancy between the base game content and the content developed in the Booster Course Pass. It was never meant to be a sincere expansion. The developer interview even confirms it was just there to buy time for a new Mario Kart. As we decided to release Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Pass, we thought that would give us a bit more time to complete development. That's when the conversation of moving it to the Nintendo Switch 2 came up. The Booster Course Pass only really exists because Mario Kart World was proving to be too difficult for the Switch to handle. Honestly, the fact that people are already anticipating DLC for an $80 game is the most telling part of this. It's an admission that this game does not have enough content. I do hope I'm wrong about this and we end up getting post-release expansions, but after the last direct had a whole section dedicated to upcoming Mario games with no mention of Mario Kart World, I am doubting that we will see any expansions from this game. In addition to costumes, there are also a bunch of random Mario characters and enemies who have been made into playable characters. I am a little torn on this addition. On one hand, Cow and Penguin are funny, I like playing as Pianta, always nice to have sunshine representation, and Nabbit arguably serves as 2D Mario game representation. However, seeing characters like Sidestepper, Dolphin, Parabiddybud, Monty Mole, Cheep Cheep, Conkdor, Swoop, Fishbone, Sting Bee feels lackluster. Diddy Kong, Funky Kong, and Dixie Kong are not in this game. Professor Egad was never in a Mario Kart game, and he still doesn't get to be in one. But hey, at least we get to play as a bunch of random NPCs from Mario games. There are definitely more interesting character picks that they could have gone with than a bunch of random Mario NPCs. So it's hard not to feel a little underwhelmed with this roster. It feels like there are more throwaway characters than there were in previous Mario Kart games. Of course, the worst part of these characters is the way they're intended to be unlocked. The recurring trend with Mario Kart World's unlockables is a lack of agency behind unlocking a specific character or cart. Originally, getting the NPC characters required the Kamek Orb. When they do appear, they will transform everyone in front of the person who used the orb into a seemingly random character chosen by whatever creatures inhabit the part of the track. You need to be ahead of whoever gets the item to have a chance of unlocking a new character. Even then, it is not guaranteed to be someone new. Kamek could very well transform you into a character you already had. It is frustrating that Mario Kart Wii had specific challenges for unlocking characters, while Mario Kart World requires a lot of being in the right place at the right time. When there's no agency behind unlocking a character, it doesn't feel like I actually did anything to get them. I just happened to get the character and maybe it was one I enjoy playing as. It's like nobody at Nintendo took 10 minutes to think through what this means for players who actually want to unlock all the characters. This mechanic for unlocking NPC Racers means players would either have to race until they get lucky enough to fill out the roster, or they could spend an annoying amount of time cheesing it in multiplayer versus. The cheesy method involves taking two Switch controllers and starting a versus race with no computers. Then one racer has to be positioned along a racetrack that has the desired unlockable character, while the other has to stay far behind enough to roll a Kamek Orb. Do note, if it doesn't roll a Kamek Orb, you may have to use Lakitu to respawn, since the game has a mechanic to prevent spawn camping on an item box. Using this method, I was able to unlock Fishbone and Cataquack shortly thereafter. Mario Kart World feels tailored to make unlocking characters as unsatisfying and tedious as possible. I probably shouldn't complain about this too much though, because as of September 23rd, there is now a more consistent alternative. Players can pilot a UFO during free roam, abduct an NPC, and they will be transformed into that character. After this update, I was able to quickly unlock Peepa and Swoop back to back. Now, as much as I prefer this solution to a random item that requires being in the right place at the right time, there is a more obvious way to make free roam more fulfilling and getting characters more fun. Make it so activities done during free roam unlocks these other characters. Nabbit sometimes appears in the overworld, and they are a playable character. It astonishes me that Nintendo didn't think Nabbit should be unlockable after chasing them in free roam. Maybe after chasing them a bunch of times you unlock variations for a gold Nabbit or something. Likewise, hitting Charge and Chuck with a green shell should have been the method to unlock them. The UFO method circles back to having the same problem as food vendors to transform into characters. It is such an easy method upon finding the NPC I am looking for and a nearby UFO that I don't feel accomplished by the time I get it. However, if I don't find the NPC or a UFO, it becomes a game of meandering around until I either give up or check a guide. That's not particularly fun. The only time the UFO method feels interesting is during a P-switch mission that involves piloting a UFO to abduct cows and then being turned into a cow. I really wish this was the means of unlocking cow because it feels like a natural, silly conclusion to the mission. I think transformations could be a means of unlocking characters, but it shouldn't necessarily be the only method. Now, players have already talked about the user interface to death, so I'm going to make this part short. But yes, the character selection is awful, and it only gets worse as you unlock costumes and other characters. I have a theory for why they did this. The developers of Echoes of Wisdom explained their intention with this game's lousy horizontally scrolling list of echoes by saying, "We wanted players to fall upon and see echoes that they may not have noticed or have been using while they're sorting through all the echoes that they have." I speculate the Mario Kart World development team wanted to invoke the same thing. They wanted players to notice a character or a costume they haven't used in a while and pick that one instead, so they made this garbled mess of a user interface. The sad thing is, there is a much easier solution to this. A random button that randomly selects a character, and it can be weighted to select ones the player hasn't used in a while. The next main unlockable are karts. In Mario Kart 8, karts were separated into different pieces for the vehicle's frame, wheels, and glider. I am glad Mario Kart World went back to focusing on the kart itself. I didn't feel it added much to have a bunch of different combinations. It is a bit of a missed opportunity, though, that the color of the kart is tied to the character who is driving it. Buddy Bug and Pipe Frame, for example, have various colors, so it would be nice if I can choose them independently from the character. The way getting a new kart works is, upon collecting 100 coins, the game randomly unlocks a new kart. Once again, it is trivially easy to get all the karts, and since it is a random selection, it's difficult to feel satisfied with getting any particular kart. To be fair, this is basically the same mechanism for unlocking karts as there was in Mario Kart 8. In that game, a new kart part was unlocked after collecting 50 to 100 coins. I don't like the reward system in that game either. I felt it was too random, so if I wanted a specific character or kart combination, I just had to keep playing until I got lucky and happened to unlock the ones I wanted. It's an incredibly passive reward system, and it's difficult for me to feel satisfied with getting a kart when I can roll over a bunch of coins in free roam and suddenly I got a new one. If Nintendo is so insistent on using coins to unlock karts, why can't I just spend my coins on the karts directly? Or better yet, integrate them in the Mario Kart world. Much like how free roam should have been treated as a time to shop at clothing stores, there should have also been car dealers who were willing to sell you vehicles in exchange for Peach coins. Going a step further, they could have made it so running over a question mark panel rewards you with some kind of decoration for the vehicle so you can further customize it. It feels like there should have been a gameplay loop in free roam that somehow tied back into character customization and vehicle customization. I understand Nintendo wanted to make a different kind of Mario Kart game, so I am a little baffled that they didn't reconsider the progression system from the last game. Why don't I unlock karts by finding them in free roam, or by completing P-switch missions, or by spending Peach coins on them? As of now, after collecting 2,900 coins, all the karts have been unlocked, and there is no reason to collect coins in free roam. Every single pile of gold coins that has been scattered around the world becomes worthless. So, if karts are awarded by coins, costumes are awarded by food items that can be found when racing, new drivers are unlocked by a random Kamek orb or a UFO, why should someone gather Peach coins, complete P-switch missions, or activate question mark panels? Stickers. Nintendo's answer to that is stickers. On one hand, stickers kind of serve a purpose. They function as achievements to highlight various feats the player has made. The sticker also functions as a cosmetic decal that is applied to most, but not all, karts. I'm sorry, but this is kind of laughable. Is there any genuine reason that this tiny decal is missing from several karts? There are way too many stickers in this game anyway. A simple fix to diversify the rewards in free roam would be to make it so you could unlock songs. Mario Kart World has a great soundtrack, and it's here to make the world more enjoyable. As said in the developer interview, we wanted players to stay engaged with this vast world for a long time without getting bored, and hope the soundtrack will support those efforts. We poured a lot of effort into each and every song. Our goal was to create distinctive music that's fun to just listen to while driving around. Honestly, this statement makes the lack of volume sliders all the more painful. They wanted people to be able to listen to and enjoy the music, and didn't take the time to implement a feature that would have made it easier to do that. Mario Kart World could have also used a jukebox that allowed players to listen to a custom mix of songs they enjoy the most. Completing the free roam activities would be more interesting if, instead of a useless sticker decal, sometimes you get a new song that could be played by the jukebox. Free roam feels like a mode of missed opportunities. There are plenty of ways they could have incentivized playing this mode further, but they just didn't. After getting 10 Peach Coins, finding 10 question mark panels, and completing 10 P-Switch missions, there is no reason to continue participating in free roam. The lackluster reward system contributes to this whole game feeling kind of shallow. Speaking of things that are meaningless, did you know you can access mirror mode in free roam? You just have to drive through the stained glass window in Peach's castle, and then you're driving through a mirrored version of the world. There is absolutely no point of this. There are no new collectibles, unlockables, or anything. It is just a novelty. Free roam is fun in the moment, but it isn't built around anything. As I said earlier, it is completely disconnected from the rest of the game modes. Imagine how cool it would be if you had to drive into the mirrored version of the world before you could access the mirrored Grand Prix and Knockout Tour. It would have actually added something to this feature, but instead it's just a novelty. There is an alternate reality where Mario Kart World was built on a smaller continent, and free roam was treated as a hub to access all the other game modes, and the game actually rewarded you for participating in its game modes, and it was the best Mario Kart ever. The developers had a fun way to unlock characters in the Grand Prix. Each cup had a designated rival that is striving for first place, and upon beating the cup, the character will be unlocked. I do wish they tried to recapture that magic with the other unlockables in the game. Instead, all we get are stickers. When there are no unlockables that tie back into the main game modes, it only furthers the feeling that this is completely tacked on. Mario Kart World is such a weird entry in the series. It feels like all the pieces are here to create a memorable experience, but it finds the weirdest ways to undermine itself. Mario Kart World prides itself on being the biggest Mario Kart with an expansive world, the most tracks, the most characters, but somehow, despite all this content, it also feels the most shallow. Every step along the way, there was some bizarre design choice that only made the game less fun to play. Intercontinental racing could have been cool, but they placed each track unreasonably far away, and as a side effect, most of the game's focus was placed on these lousy connecting routes. It could have been a technical Mario Kart game, but the interconnecting routes don't use the new tricks or techniques in a meaningful way. Battle mode could have been a fun way to play, but it was a regression from 8 Deluxe. Free roam could have been an engaging mode, but too many rewards were frivolous stickers. The open world could have been used for new kinds of game modes, but it wasn't. Completing the roster and getting all the carts could have been fun, but the method for unlocking content is either mindless or tedious. I wouldn't say this is my least favorite Mario Kart game, but it's definitely the most poorly put together Mario Kart game. They came up with the idea, Mario Kart World, and they tried their hardest to make it work. This game was a massive undertaking, with a scope larger than any of its predecessors. This could have been a special experience that was centered around a unique premise. Instead, we got a game that contains bigger, more egregious flaws than any other game in the series, and Nintendo charged $80 for it.